When was it that you were released from jail from your first sentence, and how long were you out until your later imprisoning?
I was released on the 10th of July 1976, two and a
That
half years
was
after. I done the only we just at that time we had managed to win 50% remission of our time, right? No, that meant that people up until that done 2/3 of a sentence, okay, and this was reduced to 50%, but only for a short while. Soon ended that there was a matter of appeasement at the time. However, I got out 2.5 years later, and when I came out of Long Kesh, I certainly wasn't the same person I was when I went in. First of all, I was a much better educated person, and not just political education or ideological or anything like that, or in terms of even what do you call it, academic, and self education. Because I used my time personally, and there was extrinsic and intrinsic value to whatever education you got, whether it be academic, political, or whatever. An extrinsic and it would uh, enhance the struggle, and also your greater political awareness. And then we realised too, it's a whole international dimension out there. And then we moved away from nationalist politics into Marxist politics, into Leninism. And we studied there for a long, long time. I mean, I was in a library. Our library had 11 tomes or 11 volumes of Mao Zedong's work.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, right. It's big, right? Very, very leftist, right? And very Marxist. I mean, okay, but not everybody was holding Dad's Capital in their hands to read it. You understand? But they would have read colonies, labour. No, it was localized. It was nationalized too in terms of colony. But we had a very, very left wing and international uh, dimension to our struggle. First and foremost, where I said provisions were very nationalistic at the time. But we looked beyond colony, we looked beyond Mallows, and we looked towards Guevara, and we looked towards Fidel, and we actually established good relations with the Cubans at that time in 1974-75. And through a lot of things, we had become a lot closer to the Cuban regime or authorities there than people would have understood or knew. However, this is what differentiated us from the provisional IRA, in that if their symbolism was an Easter lily, or was what do you call it, some sort of nationalist type symbol, ours was international and was a red star. So when Barrett's, he would have wore an Easter lily, but our icons are, what do you call it, iconic. All the different icons we used were all very international, and the red star was the most prominent. So
Interesting.
you can imagine, and you went through a very military regime in there. You had your command officer, your two ICs, they called no second in command, but we used them all in the Irish language. And then you had your staff brigade, and then they were responsible to outside, and we were connected to our people outside directly, and interacted with them directly and indirectly, so that we felt that we are still part of the whole struggle, even though we're isolated and contained and controlled. You understand? It was all
Right.
part of our identity. So we were different in that there, in the respect and that our education system was orientated towards internationalism and towards socialism to some degree, Marxist, Leninist, big element of that there, and Trotskyist. Learned all the different differentiations between the different ideologies. So we became educated, and uh, what's happening here is probably the most important things, the most important developments. The trouble is that that old saying, separate the silver from the dross.
Right.
Do you ever hear that there, silver? A good workman will separate the silver from the dross, and that simply means that the people inside were sussing out volunteers who were committed, who were focused and targeted for education, for the role that they're going to maintain when they get back out again. So you hadn't really left the struggles because you were in jail. You were still very much a part of it. You were still very much involved in that whole sort of, you were there, you were very, very important dots to make to join up. You were very important. And however, what you seen was a different type of volunteer now being formulated, a bit like I see a blacksmith doing, and that the men who are coming out, better educated, better trained,
Hardened. Yeah.
yeah, and have been through the whole process of cadreship. There were cadres, you understand? And this was a hell lot different from the gut reaction people who went out on the streets in 1971, 72 after internment. And what you seen then was through the processes within the jails and without the jails, a refining of the type of volunteer, a more committed, less gut reaction volunteer, but someone who could well-rounded in every aspect of what was happening and more dedicated and commitment.
Right. I can imagine being in prison would very much be a radicalizing thing. Yeah, for sure. Can you
radicalizing is it? Yeah. Plus the discipline. Every day you're up at a certain time, 9 o'clock, exercise, and then breakfast was very militaristic, and then you're out on parade, drilling. You understand? In groups, all that there added, and all around you. Remember, British Army checkpoints, British Army pillar boxes, guns, weapons, dogs, all that whole paraphernalia of containment and control that was used by the British forces, by the British government to keep you in there. It didn't always work because I was involved in the very first mass escape out of Long Kesh. The very first successful mass escape was carried out by the IRA. And that happened in around about May 1975, when we got 10 men out as a result of a tunnel we had dug, and which we had engineered to get. The whole thing was very important. It was a major psychological blow in that people thought that this was the top, and it was maintained that it was the top security, most secure jail in the world. But when I was down in the tunnel with all the rest of us and digging away, and I was on the escape committee. In the end of the day, after so many days, I think it was maybe after 20 days, we finally got the tunnel finished. Complex, massive undertaking. So it was, we got 10 men out. And these were all, first of all, good for our morale, good for our confidence, and also showed the regime outside and inside the prison of what we were now capable of, and the way this had now all orientated into a whole different type of struggle. And this 1972, 73, and 74 were some of the worst years of the Troubles. And when them men became involved straight away. When them men escaped.
Did you say you personally got out with them? No, you wouldn't have been released.
No, I had only so many. I had most of my time completed. You understand? This was May 1975, right? I only about a year to go. No, June. I came out in July. The following year, and it was boys with long sentences doing life sentences, 18 years, and those who were going to be most effective. There was a choice. There was a packing order, if you wish, as to who was going to get out first. You know what I mean? So, for example, the INLA at that time were very much an effective operation both inside and outside the jail. And I think one of the things that distinguished ourselves from all the other groups that primarily there was a focus on retaliating against loyalist collaborators and loyalist murder gang members. and we concentrated against them, and in fact we did go out and we did kill them. Hi there, John. I've been sort of a bit haphazard here in the chronology. It's hard to, what do you call it, no, stay at one point to explain another point. I'm not going in a chronological
Oh,
sequence here.
that's grand. I'll keep
Yes.
it. I'll keep it.
Mhm.
I'll keep it on track that way. Yeah, yeah.
You can edit it down to it, no, yourself, like,
No,
you know.
I probably won't even edit it. I'll just take it back.
Yeah.
I'll just take the conversation back. Okay, so let me tell you. Let me ask you about your joining of the INLA. It was in prison that you became a member,
Yeah.
right?
No, we formed the INLA in the prison and outside the prison. I was a founder member of the INLA. You understand?
Okay,
And
right.
what happened was the official IRA by this time in 1974 had made it clear that they had abandoned the armed struggle. They had abandoned a lot of things and moved uh, the whole sort of, what do you call it, political structures were very much Dublin orientated and not Northern orientated, and they were just prepared to ditch the whole armed struggle. It was a revolution betrayed, and there's actually a book by that name, Revolution Betrayed. You should look it up because I have done an interview in it. I'll give you an insight to some of the stuff that I have said in that book about the split. Because most of us were talking about the split here in 1974 in Saturday Night. And in June 1974, the IRSP was formed by Seamus Costello. Some people call him Costello, but name was Costello. And by other members who were discontented, deeply discontented by the strategy and tactics and so on, and the disabandonment of the armed struggle by the official IRA. And it was quite clear that by 1974 June that they were not going to go back to any form of armed struggle, and thus this led to a split in the movement, a very atrocious split too, and a deadly division as people end up getting killed. And that was actually all these feuds were devastating in terms of morale on each side and in terms of making the different organizations effective. However, we wanted to get on with the armed struggle, and the INLA was formed.
Very good. Okay, so how long? Sorry, how long were you free between these two prison sentences? And what was your?
6 months.
Okay, so it was
6 months.
Geez. Okay, so when you came out of prison that first time, were you straight back into like active guerrilla duty? Was it?
More or less. You don't really leave. You understand? There's a continuity from cage to from the prison. You don't really effectively leave that sort of what I call it revolutionary mindset. It's just that we do come out, you see how the situation has changed in terms of logistics, in terms of types of strategies, and in terms of what they call military activity and stuff like that as well. You learn, and that has all changed. But in your head, you're still living back at the time when you were sentenced. For example, I was sentenced in 1974, and to some degree, jail may prepare you for a lot of things, but doesn't prepare you for a lot of change, and you don't fully realize or understand that an awful lot of things have changed even within couple of 2.5 years. So you're coming out into a situation where new tactics are required, different type of personnel are required, the gut reaction, knee-jerk reaction, people are gone, and you're left with a hardened nucleus or enormity of people who are not only political cadres, but well versed and well equipped in the military aspect of things. You understand what I'm saying?
Could you maybe, I know it was a while ago, could you maybe characterize some of those differences if you could, just to give us a bit of an insight into it?
A political difference between INLA and official IRA.
Not so much political, maybe like the
Well,
like like the way they operated, that's more interesting to me at least.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a greater emphasis on intelligence, because I mean, when a lot of men coming into jail are debriefed by their command, no, their intelligence officers. You have to remember, there's a whole staff, there's a whole command structure, there's a whole process to go through, and anybody coming in, whether interned or sentenced or remanded, is debriefed about how they got there in detail and so on, and all this intelligence is sent back out, okay, into a certain quarter, and it's from this feedback that people start to understand more the nature of how do you call it, the nature of how the British are operating. There's a lot of intelligence, how the needs for change, and maybe you would have had the old unit structure. Now you had what was called in the IRA the cell structure, and the cell structure was very effective in that you could have maybe 5 men in a cell, not like way back we had these battalions and you had all these, there's all crazy stuff saying out there. But once you entered into the cell formations, very, very important in that you close down any lines of intelligence going to the British. But I mean is you were able to control who knew what at any time and who didn't know what. You understand, and so on. So we adopted the cell structure, which was very much in use in the international, whether it be Peter Meinhof or whether it be the Red Army or whatever. No, all that type of thing. But the cell structure was important. So that's just one change. The other was, first of all, more politically aware, become more politically involved. And you knew what your ideal was and what your objectives were, and what orientation you took in terms of so on. But basically, the fight was still against the British regime in the north, against the Orange regime in Stormont in the north, and all that whole apparatus of oppression. No matter what, you'd lost it with.
I was going to say, what I mean, given the INLA had like significantly less members than the provisionals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but at that time in 1974-75, initially when it split within the compounds within Long Kesh, there was 18 of us who split away from the official IRA, and we demanded our own compound, our own cage, so to say, our recognition as a group. And eventually, after a short hunger strike and other activities, we got that official recognition. In other words, we obtained political status like any other group. And there was only 18 at the start. And by summer 1975, I think we had 50 to 60 men in the cage, in compound 14, which was the INLA cage. And then it went from compound 14, we went down to compound 5, from which we escaped from, planned escape. And prior to that escape, that big mass escape in 10 men getting out, just prior to it in 1975, we had got another 5 men out through an operation carried out in the Belfast City courts, where the boys were able to find a way to manoeuvre. It was a big sort of stone that had been placed on the ceiling of each cell, and we were able to manoeuvre that and get out. It's unbelievable how you done it. But anyway, that was 5 men out, very good for morale. We became a lot of prestige involved there. And then, of course, in the years all prestige, we started to go for prestige targets, very naive in particular. And we're moving on to the troubles. And I'd like to deal with that aspect. I mean, maybe again, John, right? We're talking about,
Yeah.
I'm dealing with the compounds here and the national party and how I became involved, and how others became involved, my friends and my and how we all became dedicated cadres, and how we also became ruthless you did become ruthless. You may never have been, but as a result of your training, experience, and guided orientation, you know, you did. You became, I mean, ruthless is not the word, but you were certainly a lot more disciplined and clear cut as to what your actions would lead to, as to what was going to happen to you, because already did, and all that entailed, all the sacrifice and things that entailed for you and your family, not just you, your family and all. And this is something about the compounds that people don't understand, that the British did not understand. For every one person in Long Kesh, there was an average family of 4 or 5 outside. So if you had, at that time, say 10,000 men and women in the jails, then multiply that by 4 or 5. And that's how this was affected outside. It's a massive operation. Organising visits, family visits down to Long Kesh, right to the very last detail of planning Easter parades and cementing in all the gains that had been made, and also formulating new strategies, formulating new policies, adapting and amending accordingly, and holding your whole business down. And anything, basically what we're doing is anything that was superfluous to need was just that. Got me?
You mentioned about becoming more ruthless and kind of becoming more hardened. Would you at the time have
But
would
you're
would you have the time
more,
at the
you
time
were more
describe yourself as,
streamlined.
would you describe yourself as like sectarian? Would you have had
You're going down, but
would you have
no,
described yourself as
certainly
being
there was
like
never any no, and in our compound, in our case, there was no room for sectarianism. And for example, when the provost killed all those workers, Protestant workers up at Bestbrook, there was nobody there cheering in our compound. And we were very against the whole, we never would acknowledge the sectarian nature. Sorry, we never orientated towards anything religiously sectarian, because by this time a lot of the boys were communists anyway.
okay, interesting. What
Understand?
you said that you were out for 6 months before getting your eventual much longer sentence. What were you convicted of?
And the next one, the first one I was convicted of firearms with intent to endanger life. Okay, on all charges. And the second one I was done with firearms and armed robbery.
Did you get caught like mid armed robbery or
No,
anything?
no. Wasn't caught on an accident. Was arrested, and it was set up by a Provo agent, a British agent, but then the Provost fellow called George Points, notorious. And I had been across the border at this time. I came across the border, and then, look, to make a long story short, surrounded, hadn't a chance, and arrested. And then within, after 5 days interrogation, from which nothing was gleaned whatsoever, I was just, again, the old conveyor belt system. And on the 23rd of December, I was remanded back in custody to Crumlin Road Jail. And then began a whole new chapter or era in the history of our struggle, which culminated at that time in the hunger strikes, in which we lost 10 men. And on the first one, where I, along with Brandon Hughes, Sean McKenna, and Amy McCartney, Leo Green, and Tom McFeely, and us, we were there. This was a hunger strike to the death. And
Sorry, can I take it back to you first getting into, okay, for the second sentence of the sentence, of course. How long did you start being on the blanket straight away
yeah,
when
yeah, the blanket, there's already men on the blanket when I went on. I was sentenced 14 years in September 1977.
okay, so
And
it's a special category status was gone by yeah.
I was gone, but the haste blocks was up now, and the haste block struggle was on, and the blanket struggle was on, the blanket protest was on, and here. But I'm going to go into this more maybe later on with you. Is that okay? Maybe I don't know. I'll soon meeting because that is quite significant, and what happened there, it changed the whole course of the struggle, and has led us to where we are today. Believe it or not, the status quo, where you have Republicans up in Stormont, you have the a massive confidence within the Republican and Nationalist communities, and you had the rise of Sinn Féin, and both North and South, and all this here is a culmination of a lot of pain and suffering, which we had went through on the haste blocks, the dirt, no wash protests. Don't like calling it dirty protests. It's called a no wash protest because we couldn't get out to wash. We were getting beat, and we didn't shave then. And so when you probably would have seen a lot of the. If you do watch H3, it's a good film. If you watch Hunger, 60 Days, that'll give you an insight into life in the haste blocks. And again, now we're entering into a whole new phase of the struggle when the politicization of the struggle began and the fight against what was called criminalization, especially by the social regime, and particularly by Irish who the INLA assassinated. I think it was 1976 or June 1976. And bear in mind too that three of my comrades, four of them, was assassinated by British undercover. And you had Miriam Daly, you had Ronnie Bunting, Noah Little, and John, there was another man down Antrim, but anyway, they were all assassinated.
by
As a result,
undercover British agents, you said?
undercover British agent and in collaboration with loyalists. You know, a bit like the Finucane thing, you know what I mean?
Right.
A bit like the Finucane thing. So, but these were all our top members, our important members, especially Miriam Daly. And so we've entered into a whole new phase of things, you know. But I mean, there's a lot of things you're going to have to fill in all the gaps there. For example, there was a feud, and because of the split in 1974, a feud resulted, which a lot of in which many men were wounded, INLA and official IRA, between themselves, you know, between the old comrades, old friends, families divided, and everything else. And all. For example, you had the commanding officer of the official IRA in Belfast, a lifelong member called Macmillan, who was assassinated by INLA. And not so long before, these were all comrades. So many things have happened which were not good, and other things were a stepping stone towards where we are today. And maybe I would like to maybe, if you agree, to talk about that particular period another time.
That's grand. That's no problem. Remind me when it was that there was okay. There was obviously the INLA, an official IRA feud, but then there was
Yeah,
the
it happened in December 1970, January 1974. You can check all the papers about that there
and
online.
I was going to ask it. Then there was one with the IPLO too. Could you remember off the top of your head when that was?
That was a much different thing altogether. That was many years later. That was the IPL wasn't formed until the 1986 or something, 85. You know, that was not step within the NLA, and they were only a small faction of people, and they were they suffered the night of the long knives at the hands of professionals, the IPLO. They became involved in a lot of criminality. You understand? and so on. However, that was a different thing altogether. I mean, if you do get a book, read a book called Deadly Divisions. It's all about the history of the INLA, Deadly Divisions. Can't remember. I know the author well, and that will give you a insight of to what the INLA